All right, everybody, welcome back. My name's Bill. This is SixRounds Studio. If you remember from the last video, we filed down or reshaped the metal on the receiver so that we got it down to the dimensions of the wood as it was sanded down by the previous owner. Okay, so we've got that done. Today, in today's video, what I plan to do is to steam out all the dents, and I've got those marked here. We're going to steam out all the dents, steam out some of the clamp marks that I put in when I was clamping this together when I glued it up because of the break. So in today's video, I'm going to steam out all those dents, do the finish sand, and get the first base coat of finish on so that we let that dry overnight. So let's go ahead and get that started. I've shown you how to steam dents in the past, and the process doesn't change. We're going to use distilled water, and the idea of the distilled water is because I have a lot of minerals in my water and I don't want to introduce that into the wood. It's a simple process, and as long as the dents or the wood fibers haven't been crushed, we're generally able to steam that out. If we get breaks or crushes in the fibers, we're not always going to be able to get it completely steamed out. So today, these dents, they don't look particularly deep or troublesome, but we still have to go through the process. So we're going to simply add some water with a Q-tip directly onto the dents, and we're going to let it just sit there for a while so that it absorbs itself into the fibers. And of course, we've already done a preliminary sand on this stock because we wanted to get the finish off, the original finish off. So we've got the hand iron ready to go. I generally soak a paper towel with distilled water. Again, we want to introduce that steam or push that steam down into the cell structure of the wood. So let's try this. And as usual, the more shallow ones, they come out pretty quickly. The deeper ones, sometimes that can take a little bit extra time or a little bit extra applications of the water and the steam. This one up on the wrist area where the metal goes in, these are the ones that when I put those small clamps on in the glue up video, they left a little bit of dents, and those are mostly gone. Those came out pretty quick. Using the tip of the iron, I'm trying to focus that heat into the dent itself. It's not a bad thing to raise the grain around the circle or around the outside of the dent, but we try to focus all that heat into the dent itself. That's going to require multiple applications on this side, and then I got to turn it over and do what's on the other side as well. So I'm going to cut the cameras here, get that done, and then I'll bring you back when it's done, and then we'll start hand sanding or finish sanding the wood. That's done. Let's get this hand sanded so we can get that first coat of finish on. Now, because I sanded this earlier to get the finish off, I'm already down past the finish. So I'm using a 180 grit paper to begin with. I could go to 150, but I think this is going to be fine. So this panel right here, this little angle it's a critical shadow line or light line to the design of the gun stock. It's this little half moon curve here. And I want to make sure I'm maintaining that. And I also want to make sure that I'm not going down below the metal while I'm doing that. So that one looks pretty good. So I'm using this hand not only to hold the stock, but to give me something that represents the same angle, because I don't want this thing rocking as I'm doing this. And I'm using short strokes, trying to control both the angle and the rock. I don't want to rock this as I'm sanding it either, because I want to maintain that half moon appearance. Okay, that looks good. Now, I've mentioned in several of my previous videos about my sanding block. It's a piece of walnut that I milled flat and then put a piece of thin rubber over it. So by milling it flat, it helps keep those surfaces, those flat surfaces, flat. It doesn't introduce curves, and by putting the rubber, it keeps me from rolling over and putting hard edges in. If you've been following me long enough, you know that when I do restorations, I try not to do an over restoration. I try not to make them look brand new again. When you do that, you erase all of the story, everything that talks about the life that the firearm has lived. I mean, you're gonna eliminate some of that, and I get that. But every firearm, everything in history has a story, and you try to maintain that as much as you can. But at the same time, you want to respect the work and the effort that you're doing, because otherwise, just leave it alone, which we often encourage customers to do. If a gun has a nice original condition, has a nice original patina, and that patina does not distract from the quality of the gun, sometimes it's just best to leave the gun just the way it is. Always sanding with the grain. You all know that. You don't want to go against the grain. Now, for some of those deeper scratches and dents, I'm heading up to a 100 grit paper. That will be a little more aggressive. But I'm not using that aggressive paper up near the edges where the metal fits in. So we've got a couple small discolored dents right in this area here that would not steam out completely, but I'm going to leave those just the way they are. When you start putting the finish on, the finish it'll hide them a little bit or soften them, because we'll be adding a little bit of color back in. But you'll see that dent in the final result, and again, that'll give it a well-used but cared-for appearance, or at least that's always my intention or my plan. So we're finishing this with a 180 grit paper, and we could go to 220, and we might, but I'm doubting it. I think the 180 grit is more than adequate for walnut. We just want to make sure we're getting all of the 100 grit scratches out. We want to make sure all the sanding marks are going front to back and we're not getting any cross sanding or against the grain sanding, because that'll show up in finish. Now I've got it in the vise here because it gives me a little more control around this inletting, where it is, like I mentioned in the previous video, it is somewhat fragile around here. We want to make sure we're not breaking our edges or breaking these lines or these inletting lines. But I also don't want to sand below the metal, so I have to take more metal off the receiver. We want to get this to be a match sand as close as we can get it. And in the vise gives me two hands that I can use while doing this. Alright, so we're going to continue to sand this with a 180 grit. And when I got it done, I'll bring you back and we'll talk about the finish that we're going to put on this. I got it all sanded, and the last thing I like to do is to use just my hands, because my hands will curve nicely around the wood itself. So I've got, again, 180, and I've folded it into thirds, and then just grabbing it with my pinky and my thumb, I'm going to just lightly sand it. And the objective is to get all the sanding marks going in the same direction, but also by using my hands or my fingers curve nicely around all the contours and the shape. So any hard edges that I might have put in when I was sanding, with the blocks and everything else, I can ensure that those are pulled out of there. I'm putting pretty light pressure, so I'm not really removing a whole lot of material here. Again, the objective is just to get all the sanding marks going in the same direction. Alright, this looks really, really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a wash coat of finish. It's a real thin coat that I can get onto the wood. That's going to do a couple things. It's going to put that first layer of protection, but it's also going to reveal any sanding marks that I didn't get out. That's the nice thing about using a wash coat. It sort of reveals any flaws in your sanding or any scratches that you might have missed. So my wash coat is nothing special. It's just me, as I said, putting a thin down finish over the wood so that I can reveal any imperfections that I might have left behind. It's a simple mixture. I just used tung oil and mineral spirits, and I mix that 50-50. So I thin it down 50% so that it goes on really thin and gets down inside those pores. But before I do the wash coat, I want to wipe it down with a tack rag, just pulling a lot of that dust off from the sanding. So the wash coat is something I'm just going to apply by hand, just using my fingers. And I like to do it this way for a couple reasons. One reason is I can force it down into the grain. And the other reason is I'm building a little bit of heat. So that heat helps I don't know, just thin it down or make it a little bit easier to push it down into that grain. This is actually a beautiful piece of old walnut. It has a lot of figure, and you'll be able to see that more as we get closer to final finish. So far, this is looking really pretty well, pretty nice. All right, so I've got two pieces of paper towel. The first is the one that I grab with because I don't want to leave my fingerprints in here. The second is the one that I'm wiping this down with. Let's flip it over. This is really beautiful piece of walnut. I don't know how much of that's going to show. You can, oh yeah, you can see some of that figure there. Isn't that just stunning? Beautiful. All right, I'm going to let this rest for about 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll do a second wash coat. All right, so we're going to get this last coat of finish on, or last wash coat of finish on. And again, it really helps to fill in the pores because it's thin enough that it can get down in those pores. And again, the heat from my hand sort of warms that finish up and pushes it down in. If you're one of my patrons, and I appreciate all of you who are helping to support the channel, I have a special announcement coming up here in the next couple days. I have a few special features coming just for my patrons exclusively, and that'll all be over on Patreon itself. So if you're not a member of Patreon, please consider signing up. And for those of you who are, thank you for being here. And got a few special videos coming up just for you guys, and I'll tell you about it in the next video. And I will hint that it does involve a 1891 Winchester Model 73. That should be a real fun project that I can share with you guys exclusively. So head on over to Patreon, sign up if you're interested. At the $5 level, you'll get access to those special features as we talk about that Winchester 73. This looks really good, guys. This came out good. I don't see any scratches that I have to go out after. Color is good. The grain is really nice on this. So we're going to let this dry overnight. When we come back on the Stevens, on this buttstock, I'm going to add in some color coats because traditionally these things have sort of a red overtone. So I'm going to add that red overtone into the coloring on the finish so that we begin to pop that red out a little bit. And again, making it look more traditional as it looked back in the day in the early 20th century when these things were built. All right, I'm going to hang this here. This hangs loosely in the air and dries. So guys, like I said, appreciate you all being here. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Comments are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for being here, guys, and I will see you in the next video.